But another thing I wanted to talk about this week. So we got footage released from an October incident involving the Indianapolis Police Department. Now, 36-year-old Cartoneo McBride was wanted on multiple warrants and has since been charged with over 10 counts of child sexual abuse. So keep that in mind. If these charges are proven true, not a good guy, but that's a big if, and there's a process, right? So footage shows McBride following officers' instructions to walk toward them, his hands up the whole time. Then, when told he was about to be tased, McBride turns around to run while holding his pants. Now, a detective issued the directive to tase the suspect, and a stun gun was deployed, but another officer fired a bullet. And while on the ground, McBride, again, it appeared to be he's pulling up his shorts to run. When police fired 5 more shots, an investigation determined that the suspect was unarmed, and all 3 officers that fired shots have been placed on administrative leave as per IMPD policy. Cindy, I'm going to start with you on this one. IMPD's been on a bit of a tear lately. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the city, but they just shot a guy in Franklin last week or the week before, and we talked about it on this show. What's going on up there?
Well, I mean, number one, I mean, I have a family member in law enforcement, and I worry about my cousin every day. Indiana has removed all restrictions on gun ownership. We are where the other states around us, especially Chicago, go to find weapons and guns. And it's not really a surprise that when law enforcement encounters a person, and I'm not defending them by any stretch of the imagination, they would be afraid of what they're going to find. And our lawmakers have, in Indianapolis, our state and state representatives and state senators have made the culture in Indiana where we don't know who is carrying a weapon or not. And I think that's an important piece of this to remember. But I've also read a little bit about this in that some of the charges that he faced came after this happened. And again, I'm not an attorney. I'm just reading things on the news. So I think it is just a really awful time, number one, to be a person who is suspected of anything in Indiana if you're dealing with law enforcement, especially if you do not happen to be white. And I also think that, if you're a law enforcement person, you are really worried about your own safety, maybe a little, it's very dangerous to be out there in any case that way. So I think it is a very difficult situation, but I think it all comes back to how many weapons we have on our streets in Indiana because of the laws that we have put into place that allow those without essentially any regulation.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it from that angle, right? Like Republicans are the, we support our law enforcement party, but they're also the, hey, let's get a bunch of guns on the streets party. And that, puts law enforcement in a tricky place. Derek, you just did a deep dive on guns recently, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Tell me, what do you think? I hadn't thought of that angle that Cindy brought up.
Right now, especially, all across the country, we're in a culture where guns are an identity to people now. Like, I'm a gun owner, so that means I check these boxes. And if you ever try to take my guns away, you're taking my personality away. Which, we have to get away from that mentality, but it is shoved at us from every angle. From, NRA a little less now, but NRA, from movies, from music. It's always gun culture. And I mean, I get it. We're the USA. Citizen soldiers is what won us our independence and all of that. We have the Second Amendment that guarantees our right. But guns are a tool. They are not a personality trait. And we have to remember that guns are a tool to be used in the proper way and at a
Hey,
proper time.
listen, I identify with my table saw, Derek. You would try it from my cold, dead hands. Ross, listen, I want to ask you from a legal standpoint, listen, might be a bad guy. Prove it. Take him to court. Prove it. You don't just shoot him.
Well, I think you see, look, this is not an isolated incident in Indianapolis or anywhere in the country. What tends to happen is one of these things happens. Obviously, George Floyd, the most famous of examples, people get really upset. And then there is pushback from law enforcement and people who are afraid. And all of a sudden, it's not a problem anymore until the next one comes along. And that tends to be the cycle that repeats again and again and again. Look, I will tell you, it's a problem with police culture. It is a problem with police culture. And that is not, we all need police. I mean, so you get folks who support the police say, well, if you challenge anything that we do, you must hate the police, which is ridiculous. We all need the police. We all appreciate the police, but we don't appreciate bad police work. And it's not a few bad apples. We've seen that again and again and again. It is the culture that they have. You know, Cindy said it. They're afraid of what they will find. So many of our police officers are afraid when they are out on the streets, and they shouldn't be afraid, and they shouldn't act out of fear. They should act out of training. Why are you threatening to tase someone in the first place who is cooperating with you? Why is escalation your first line of defense? De-escalation should be the role. But unfortunately, most of our police officers are trained to escalate. And most of our police officers are trained that, respect my authority. That's how I take control of the situation, is Eric Cartman, right? Respect my authority. It's funny because it's true. As Homer Simpson says, to mix my cartoons. But look, it's a real problem. And when you look at what's happening in the Caribbean, with our country saying we're going to blow people up without any due process, we can see, look, if that becomes the norm in international waters, it's not much of a stretch to say that becomes the norm on the streets of Indianapolis. We shoot first and ask questions later. And look, yeah, bad guy, good guy, I don't care. I've known a lot of people who were accused of being bad guys who turned out that they weren't. And I've also known a lot of really bad guys that deserved due process, because everybody does. And when the police become the judge, jury, and executioner, we live in more of a police state than we live in now. So people need to see the real world effects of lawlessness by the government. It is a real threat. But I would just like to see, our police forces really look at their jobs differently, really look at themselves as part of the community and not as an occupying force, which unfortunately sometimes they do.
Yeah, it is unfortunate.